الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Before I actually begin, can I just double check the live stream is good? Definitely? Audio, all that? Very good. Because the worst thing when you start a lecture and then you realize something's wrong on the live stream and then you have to fix it while you're talking at the same time, and I can't do two things at once. We begin with the praise of Allah Azza wa Jal. We send salah and salam upon the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach us what will benefit us, to benefit us with what He teaches us, to increase us in knowledge, to give us the ability to practice it. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal, Allahumma ati nufusana taqwaha, wa zakkiha anta khayru man zakkaha, anta waliyuha wa mawlaha. It's a beautiful dua. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Oh Allah, give our souls their taqwa and purify them. You are the best of those who purify. You are the one we entrust our souls to, and you're the one who takes care of them. Because today we came to talk about influence or be influenced. And this topic in reality, I'm going to be a little bit different to how I took this topic, by the way, in London. So it's not going to be exactly the same. I don't really do copy-paste topics, Yani, very well. I want to start by looking at the sources of influence. What does a human being get influenced by? What are the things that affect whether we influence other people or whether other people influence us? The first thing I want to talk about, my dear brothers and sisters, is the nafs, the soul. Ultimately, Allah Azza wa Jal has created each one of us with a nafs. And this nafs is able to be influenced by many things. And that is why we have been told about our desires. Al-hawa. And al-hawa is for your nafs to lean towards something that it enjoys from the desirable things, the shahawat, that the sharia didn't call you to. And Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَلَا تَتَّبِعِ الْهَوَى فَيُضِلَّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Do not follow your desires, so then you become misguided from the path of Allah. And Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَلَا تُطِعْ مَنْ أَغْفَلْنَا قَلْبَهُ عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا وَاتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ وَكَانَ أَمْرُهُ فُرُطًا. Don't obey the one that we've closed his heart from our remembrance, and he follows his desires. Ibn Kathir, he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, in the ayah, أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَى. Have you seen the one who took his desires as his God? He said, meaning that whenever his soul thinks something is good, is made to think something is good, he automatically acts as though this is the best thing for him. He takes this as his religion, as his way of life, just what feels good to himself. As Allah Azza wa Jal said, أَفَمَنْ زُيِّنَ لَهُ سُوءُ عَمَلِهِ فَرَآهُ حَسَنًا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يُضِلُّ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Have you seen the one who his evil deeds have been made to seem good to him? And Allah misguides whoever He wills. And he said something profound. وَمَنْ تَأَمَّلَ الْمَعَاصِي وَجَدَهَا تَنْشَأُ مِنْ تَقْدِيمِ هَوَى النُّفُوسِ عَلَى مَحَبَّةِ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم. Whoever really thinks about sin realizes that all sin comes from preferring your desires over loving Allah and loving the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And actually here he gave you the answer to the problem. The problem is that there is a love of things which is getting a priority over the love of Allah Azza wa Jal, or it's competing with the love of Allah. And if the love of Allah were great enough and the love of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam following the love of Allah, then this person would have something to extinguish this fire inside of themselves. But the reality is, we as human beings cannot get rid of this nafs and its ability to be influenced, except by purifying it in the way that the Sharia commands us to do it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فَأَبَيْنَ أَن يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَأَشْفَقْنَ مِنْهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. Indeed, we offered the responsibility of Islam to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, and they declined it, and they were scared of it, and mankind took it on. He was extremely oppressive and extremely ignorant. Extreme oppression and ignorance. This is what your nafs will go to if you don't make tazkiyatun nafs in the way that the Sharia came with. Your nafs is going to become like that. It's going to become a nafs that is influenced by evil. If you don't purify it the way the Sharia told us. And that's why Allah tells us about 2 types of nafs in the Quran. And if you want, say 3. Like in the stronger view is that there's only 2 types of nafs Allah tells us about in the Quran. إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. The soul is constantly inclined towards evil. It's being influenced. The soul is pulling you towards what is evil, towards what is bad for you, towards what tastes good for a minute and pains you for a lifetime. For one single minute, there's a ladha. And some of the scholars said, what a terrible situation it is that we find our ladha in ma'siyatillahi azza wa jal, that we find our pleasure in disobeying Allah azza wa jal. But that temporary moment of enjoyment and a lifetime of misery, and an akhirah which perhaps will turn to misery because of that. Wal-'iyadhu billah. And the person, subhanallah, this nafs is just pulling you that way because you are zalimun, jahilun, unless you bring tazkiyatun nafs from the Sharia. Where does tazkiyatun nafs come from? How do you clean this heart that is open to being influenced by al-dhulm, wal-jahl, and all of the other things, wal-ladhat, wal-shahawat, wal-hawa? How do you start to purify that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, for example, the ayah comes more than once in the Quran, but let's just take the example of the dua of Ibrahim. رَبَّنَا وَبَعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. The ayah came in different ways and different wordings more than once in the Quran. O Allah, send among them a messenger. Keep this in mind, a messenger who will recite your ayat. Messenger, recite your ayat. And will teach the Quran and the Sunnah, the Quran and the Hikmah, and will purify them. The reality is these 3, they are the explanation of how to do the 4th one. You purify yourself by following the messenger. You purify yourself through his guidance. You purify yourself through reciting the Quran and studying it and following it. And you purify yourself by learning your religion from the Quran and the Sunnah. That is how you achieve tazkiyatun nafs. And Allah said, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. Successful is the one who purifies it, and lost, failure, misery for the one who causes his soul to be tarnished and dirtied. The soul is pulling you. Ammaratun bisu. It is pulling you towards things that are bad for you. They have a small enjoyment, a small taste, a small thing, which is nothing, which is not the sweetness of Iman. It's not the sweetness of loving Allah, but it pulls you that way. As for the other nafs, what is it? Ya ayyatuha an-nafsu al-mutma'inna irji'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyya fadkhuli fi ibadi wadkhuli jannati. O soul who is content, peaceful. This is the good soul. This soul is the soul that Allah said, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَىٰ. As for the one who fears the maqam is two things: fears standing in front of Allah, and he's scared of Allah's status, Allah's names and attributes and actions. And he stops his soul. He stops his soul from what it is inclined towards. The soul is inclined, it's going one way, and he stops it. One of my mashayikh said to me something, wallahi, I remember it like yesterday. He said, your nafs is like a camel. The first time you tell it to sit, you have to drag it to the ground. With all your strength, you have to pull it onto the ground. But once you pulled it a couple of times, it's going to sit for you. That's how your nafs is. Your nafs wants to be influenced. Your nafs wants to absorb all of these evils that are coming from outside. And it's not just that your nafs absorbs them, it wants to absorb them. You have to cut it off. You have to stop your nafs from being influenced by what is wrong. And if you do that, Jannah is your destination. And if you do that, your nafs becomes mutma'inna, tranquil, peaceful, content. Someone might say, Muhammad Tim, you forgot one of the nufus. What about وَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالنَّفْسِ اللَّوَّامَةِ? I swear by the soul that blames itself. The stronger view among the scholars of tafsir is the soul that blames itself is both. If it's a good soul, it blames itself for making mistakes, and it blames itself for missing out on opportunities. And if it's a bad soul, it blames itself for doing good, and it blames itself for not taking advantage of opportunities to do wrong. And Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, نَفْسُ الْهَوَى وَالشَّهْوَى لَا يُعَاقَبْ عَلَيْهِ. Amazing what he said. Just think about this a second. He said, the actual hawa, desire you have, and the shahwa, the cravings you have, the desires you have, you're not punished for them. What are you punished for then? بَلْ عَلَى اتِّبَاعِهِ وَالْعَمَلِ بِهِ. You're punished for allowing yourself to follow them. You're not punished for a feeling, a desire coming up in your heart. You're punished for the footsteps you take behind it. فَإِذَا كَانَتِ النَّفْسُ تَهْوَى وَهُوَ يَنْهَاهَا كَانَ نَهْيُهُ عِبَادَةً لِلَّهِ وَعَمَلًا صَالِحًا. So if his soul is craving something, trying to influence him, and he stops it, his stopping it is an act of worship and a righteous good deed. And then from this came the ayah, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. So the first thing we understood is, before you blame the people, the society, the friends and everything, أولا يا أخي بين النفس اللوامة. Before anyone you blame yourself. Blame the fact that you find this taste. Blame the dhulm and the jahl that is in you that you're trying to remove with the sharia. That's what we're trying to do. In here, in this heart, there is oppression, there is ignorance, there are desires, there's corruption. And we are trying to stop that from influencing your body and the actions of the heart and the actions of the limbs and the tongue in following that is there. This heart has all kinds of bad things in it, and our job is to work hard with Allah's help to clean it. With Islam. You don't need to go outside of Islam. Tazkiyatun nafs is not something you do in a cave with a funny sheikh and some candles. That's different. هؤلاء غير يعني. Tazkiyatun nafs is reading the Quran. Tazkiyatun nafs is pondering on the sunnah and practicing it. Tazkiyatun nafs is dua. Tazkiyatun nafs is istighfar. It's what the Quran and sunnah came with. And that will give you something. It will give you the love of Allah. And the more love you have of Allah, the more that love will overcome and override those desires. Until what happens? Until you keep away from a sin. I don't say all sins, because all sins, that's not going to happen. But you keep away from a sin because you can't bear to be distant from Allah. You can't bear your heart to be distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you love Allah more than you love that feeling and that enjoyment that you take in your heart. So before we blame anyone else, let's start and blame an-nafs al-lawwama. Let's be and blame ourselves first of all. But not blame ourselves like the bad soul, blame ourselves like the good soul. Blame ourselves for doing something wrong, blame ourselves for the ignorance that is there, blame ourselves for missing out on the good. And by that, Allah Azza wa Jal rewards you with Al-Jannah. Now we come to the second influence, and it is one of the biggest influences upon a person. And that is, number one, the greatest enemy. Inna ash-shaytana lakum aduwwun fattakhidhuhu aduwwa. Shaitan is an enemy to you, so take him as your enemy. And from this is an ayah that I think we don't think about enough. We all know it, but we actually don't think about this ayah enough. من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس. You seek refuge from Allah. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس, from the evil of the whisperer who withdraws. الذي يوسوس في where? صدور الناس. لا يوسوس في أذان الناس. He doesn't whisper in your ear. He whispers into your heart. I want you to listen to what As-Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala said about this whispering in the heart. He said, وهذه السورة مشتملة على الاستعاذة برب الناس ومالكهم وإلههم من الشيطان الذي هو أصل الشرور كلها ومادتها الذي من فتنته وشره أنه يوسوس في صدور الناس. He said, this surah covers seeking refuge with Allah, the Lord of the worlds and the sovereign and the one who is worshipped, from the shaitan, who is the source of evil, the source of all evil. That from his fitna and his evil is that he whispers into the chests of men, so he makes the evil seem good to them. فَيُحَسِّنُ لَهُمُ الشَّرَّ. He makes evil look like it's good. وَيُرِيهِمْ إِيَّاهُ فِي صُورَةٍ حَسَنَةٍ. And he shows evil to them in a beautiful way. It's not evil, it's freedom. That's what they tell you, right? You're not enslaved, you're free. This is what shaitan whispers into people's hearts. He takes evil, وَيُرِيهِمْ إِيَّاهُ فِي صُورَةٍ حَسَنَةٍ. He shows it to them as though it's something so beautiful. And he causes them to have the desire to do it. And he makes evil seem something ugly to them. And he holds them back from doing it. وَيُرِيهِمْ إِيَّاهُ فِي صُورَةٍ غَيْرَ صُورَتِهِ. فِي صُورَةٍ غَيْرِ صُورَتِهِ. And he shows it to them in a way that it isn't. And in reality, this is such a description. وَهُوَ دَائِمًا بِهَذِهِ الْحَالِ يُوَسْوِسُ. The shaitan's always like this, يُوَسْوِس, and then he's the al-khannas, the one who disappears. أَن يَتَأَخَّرْ إِذَا ذَكَرَ الْعَبْدُ رَبَّهُ وَاسْتَعَانَ عَلَى دَفْعِهِ. Meaning, he runs away when someone remembers Allah and seeks Allah's help and refuge. I think it's very beautiful because this is the influence of the shaitan. What is the influence of the shaitan? He will make something bad seem really, really good to you. And he will make something good seem really, really bad or worthless or pointless or hard or difficult to you. And so he changes the way you see things, the way you feel about things. And he puts this into the sadr, into your chest, not into your ear. You don't hear, normally we don't hear the words of the shaitan. But we just feel like we want to go towards something. It's not that bad. Some of the scholars said it wasn't haram. I'll make tawbah later. It's haram, but it's okay, I'm going to make tawbah later on. Just one time, last time. Or even worse than that. The worst one is he makes you actually think it to be something good. So what does the shaitan do? The shaitan makes you think that this particular thing is something good. So you get somebody who their whole fitrah is changed. They change. They change the way Allah created them. The nature, physical or internal, that Allah created them with, they change it. The shaitan makes them want to change it. And he makes them feel like what Islam is offering them is not that great and not that good, and maybe it's a bit, oppressive or backwards or whatever. And what they've got, what the shaitan is offering is the way forward. And Allah explained this beautifully to us. In Surah Ibrahim, وَقَالَ الشَّيْطَانُ لَمَّا قُضِيَ الْأَمْرِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَعَدَكُمْ وَعْدَ الْحَقِّ وَوَعَدْتُكُمْ فَأَخْلَفْتُكُمْ وَمَا كَانَ لِيَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ إِلَّا أَنْ دَعَوْتُكُمْ فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي فَلَا تَلُومُونِي وَلُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Al-ayah. Shaitan will say when it's all done, the matter's all decided and judgment is finished, Allah promised you, and Allah's promise was true. الشيطان يعدكم الفقر ويأمركم بالفحشاء والله يعدكم مغفرة منه وفضلا. Shaitan promises you poverty and tells you to do filthy, immoral deeds, and Allah promises you forgiveness and virtue. Allah promised you and His promise was true. And shaitan promised you and he broke his promise. And he says, I never had any authority over you. I couldn't put you in the fire. Allah never gave me the ability to choose and say this Abdullah and Fatima and Maryam and Zayd are going to be with me in the fire. I never had the ability to do that. Illa, just one thing. And da'awtukum. I gave you da'wah. I just invited you to the party. You decided to come. فَاسْتَجَبْتُمْ لِي. And you answered me. فَلَا تَلُومُونِ. So don't blame me. وَلُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Blame yourselves. Don't blame me, but blame yourselves. And that is true. And at the end of the day, the shaitan was an enemy to you, but Allah did not give him the ability to choose you to be from the people of Jahannam. Allah only gave him the ability to invite you. And the shaitan is very good at selling things to you. You know, you get these salesmen who sell you, dodgy, broken things. Like the used car salesman. He comes and says, this car, it's a gem. Don't worry, it's very good. Gearbox, perfect. Engine, it's done 2,000, 3,000 kilometers only. Don't worry, beautiful car. Warranty, whatever you want. Lovely. It's cheap price just for you. And you get in the car, the minute you take the car into your possession to sign the paper, the gearbox sounds like it's got sawdust inside, the engine is putting black smoke out of it, the car stops halfway on the road, he comes back and says, oh, you should have done your research before you bought it. Shaitan is worse than that. Aswa minhu, worse than that. The shaitan knows what you like. He doesn't know your heart. Don't think shaitan knows everything. Allah knows everything. Shaitan doesn't know everything. But Allah has given shaitan the ability for a wisdom to know what suits you. Because not all of us are tempted or influenced by the same things. Is it not true? Not all of us are influenced by the same stuff. Some of us are more tempted by one thing. Some of us are more tempted by another thing. Some of us, we kind of have a bit of a craving for something, and some of us have for something else. So shaitan looks and says, okay, how am I going to get this one? Talbis iblis, the traps of shaitan. And if you think about it, for example, how does the shaitan misguide, as an example, a young guy? His young guy is in good health. He's in the peak of his youth. Shaitan takes him with some temptations and desires and fitnatun nisa and maybe alcohol and drugs and these type of things that we see that the young boys are falling into, zina and all that. Look at the abid, the worshipper, the one who's praying. His pleasure is in his prayer. He just wants to fast in the day. Doesn't want anything from the dunya. You think the shaitan leaves him and says, go ahead. No. Shaitan says, I got something for you. Don't worry. I've got the product just for you. Bid'ah. Just make this dhikr. Just make this dhikr. Allahu. Don't worry. Beautiful dhikr, your ibadah. Shaitan got him from that. Shaitan doesn't leave it. The alim, do you think shaitan leaves him? No. The alim, shaitan goes from another way. Either he leaves off his ibadah and his amal for talab al-ilm. So you see he misses his sunnah prayers and his extra prayers and his qiyam al-layl, and he's just reading book, but he's not acting on it, and he speaks about Allah without knowledge perhaps. Shaitan has got for everyone a package for you. Like the shaitan will influence you, and you need to know that he's your enemy. And you need to know the way that he's gonna make things seem nice to you and beautiful to you. But here's the thing. The shaitan has helpers. And those helpers, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions them in more than one place in the Quran. I'll give you an example. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَا لِكُلِّ نَبِيٍّ عَدُوًّا شَيَاطِينَ الْإِنسِ وَالْجِنِّ يُوحِي بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ زُخْرُفَ الْقَوْلِ غُرُورًا وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ مَا فَعَلُوهُ فَذَرْهُمْ وَمَا يَفْتَرُونَ. Allah Azza wa Jal said, the translation of which is, we have made for every prophet enemies, shayateen, devils, from the jinn and from the men. From jinn and from humans. And then Allah explained that they work together. يُوحِي بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ. They inspire each other. زُخْرُفَ الْقَوْلِ غُرُورًا. With this adorned, kind of decorated, beautiful, kind of looking speech, which is deception. And if your Lord had willed, they would not have done it. So leave them in what they invent. What I want you to understand is that there are certain people who knowingly or unknowingly are supporting the shaitan in his call. And that's not surprising. Wallahi, don't be surprised about that. I'm not talking about like Satan worshippers, and I'm not talking about cults, and I'm not talking about like, sacrificing chickens at midnight. I'm talking about people who are working on the same team as the shaitan. And the shaitan encourages them, and they encourage each other to deceive the people. And here comes the influence from shayateen al-ins. That's a big influence. Don't just think that it's a jinni whispering to you. وإن كان هذا, even though that might be more common, perhaps this shaitan will have a person who will reach out and do the same thing. Promise you something, call out to you, tell you to follow your desires. Try to soften your heart towards something. I'm sincere for you. Didn't shaitan say to Adam and Hawa, I'm a sincere advisor to you. I'm really, I want the best for you. فَدَلَّاهُمَا بِغَرُورٍ. فَدَلَّاهُمَا بِغُرُورٍ. And he falsely led them down that path. He falsely led them down that. He led them down a path that was complete deception. And there are people doing this. Some of these people are people who are influencing you through the media, some of them through entertainment, movies and music and celebrity culture, some of them these days influencers. And I'm not even saying these people are worshipping the shaitan, or that's a topic for another day. I'm saying that they're doing the same job. Their job and the job of shayateen al-jinn is the same job. To call you to something that is pleasurable to your corrupt soul, the soul which is dhalima, jahila, that evil soul, it's pleasurable to that soul, and they call you towards it in order to deceive you and in order to make you go the wrong way. And these people, wallahi, the influence they have on this society is huge. On our society is huge. And what has actually made it worse is the fact that today, before, to get influence, there was a bit limited contact. People, when I was younger, I'm not that old, but when I was younger, people went to the movies only once a month. Akhi, today you have Netflix in your house. The movies come to you every night, every day, whatever you want. That's the reality. The reality is, before, there was a few celebrities, people knew their names, a handful of people that people were influenced by. Today, you open YouTube, there's thousands upon them, influencers and social media personalities, and they're doing the same job of the shaitan. Exactly the same. And shayateen al-jinn are inspiring them to do it. يُوحِي بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ زُخْرُفَ الْقَوْلِ غُرُورًا. They're telling each other and inspiring each other to do it. And when you realize this, you realize that they're not going to come and say, أَنَا shaitan. I'm a shaitan. No way, they're not going to come like that. They're going to come like shaitan came to Adam and Hawa and say, I am a sincere advisor to you. I'm here to advise you and be good for you, and I'm just going to tell you And there's so many things we've seen. Wallah, hadith wala haraj. I don't know where to start. But you see these things and you see these people and our young people caught up in these people's lives. And almost like, I'm not going to use the word worship. Muslims don't worship besides Allah. But this kind of extreme attachment to these people. And some of them even come in the shape of the Muslims. That's why you have Muslim women, and the woman starts off with hijab tutorials where she's telling the lady how not to wear the hijab properly. Because I'm going to be honest with you, a beautiful hijab, it's like a chocolate fire guard. لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع. What's the point of a beautiful hijab? In a beautiful hijab, the whole point of the hijab, ma'alish, the point of the hijab is that it diverts the gaze, not that it makes you look more. But that's a side point. She starts with the beautiful hijab. Then she goes to makeup tutorials. Wallahi al-azim, kam wa kam, I'm not talking one or two. Maybe 1,000 of them. Then makeup tutorials. How to do your makeup beautiful to go with your hijab. Just to make your lipstick match the color of the hijab. Take out the color of your eyes. Wallah, she looks better with it than she did without. That's not the point still. What does she do on the third day? What does she do on the third day? She takes off her hijab and she says, Wallahi, Allah knows what's in my heart. Wallahi al-azim. Am I speaking from imagination? La wa rabbi, la wa rabbi. She takes off her hijab and she says, I feel now I wasn't being my true, authentic self. And now I'm being true to myself and this is my truth. And my heart knows what is, Allah knows what's in my heart and I haven't left my faith. My heart is full of faith, but I've just removed my hijab just so that I can now be someone who is true to myself. And I feel like people now don't judge me. A'udhu billah. Look at what she's done. Wallahi shaitana. Don't say anything else. She's doing the same job as the shaitan. I don't care, miskina, her own problems are her own problems. Nas'al Allah Azza wa Jalla afiyah. We ask Allah for good for everyone. I want to know why she's gone out on the camera to tell her sisters, first of all, she took them away from the hijab al-shar'i. The hijab that Allah sent down in the Quran. The one that protects them from harm. ذَلِكَ أَدَنَا يُعْرَفْنَ فَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ. She took them away from that. Then she started showing them how to beautify themselves beyond what is allowed in the Sharia. Then on top of that, she took off the hijab. Not that. Let her take off the hijab. Whatever you want to do is your grave, sister. On top of that, what did she do? She starts telling them what irja, that my heart is full of iman and doesn't matter what you do in your actions. So sister, to be honest, whatever you want to live your life, just live it because your heart is full of iman. Irja, this irja has destroyed the people. This belief that your actions and your heart are separate. Wallahi billahi alaykum. One hadith, almost everyone heard this hadith. Ala wa inna fil jasadi mudgha idha salahat salaha al jasadu kullu wa idha fasadat fasada al jasadu kulluhu ala wa hiya al qalb. Indeed, in the body there's a piece of flesh. If it is upright, the whole body will be upright. And if it's corrupt, the whole body will be corrupt. And it's the heart. How can you say my iman is in my heart and Allah knows my heart is full of iman? If your heart was full of iman, by the text of the hadith, your body would be full of iman. Your clothing would be full of iman. Your behavior would be full of iman. Your akhlaq would be full of iman if your heart was full of iman. And if your outer appearance is not full of iman, then I'm sorry, your heart is not full of iman. That's the truth. And wallahi, I'd love to say it because I want the best for everybody. Wallahi, I really want the best. And the first thing you have to do is break this horrible idea that iman is in your heart and it doesn't show on your actions. And there is not one of the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah who held this view, ever. Rather, all of them united upon the fact that iman is in the heart and on the tongue and in the actions. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ. Allah would not cause your iman to be lost, speaking about the direction of the qibla. Iman is on the outside and the inside. So now look at this person did the job of the shaitan, even if, I don't mind they go pray. That's their thing. I don't mind, they did what they did. Nasallah, and we ask Allah to guide everybody. But now I want to know, now you came on the screen and you influenced maybe 100,000 young Muslim girls to do what you did. And you not only influenced them, but instead of saying, I'm doing a sin and maybe I'll repent, you took it off and said, it's actually my heart is still full of Iman. And you corrupted those people. For Allah, how are you going to stand in front of Allah Azza wa Jalla? The point is that this is just one example. I can give examples for the brothers, I can give examples for people, young people, older people. These people coming on the camera and influencing you. And all they are just doing is the same job as the shaitan. To call the people towards their desires, to call people away from what Allah wants for them and what Allah Azza wa Jalla loves for them, to call people away from the natural way of behaving. When we talk about calling away from the natural way of behaving, look at what's going on today. Look at the situation. All this stuff that is going on today with these different ideologies and these different, everyone has a personal pronoun and all of that. I'm trying to be nice. I try not to get myself banned before I start. Like in reality of it, Shaitan wants to change you from what Allah created you upon. Ikhwani, can we all agree that Allah Azza wa Jal created you when you were born as a baby in a particular way? That's a biological fact. That is science. Allah Azza wa Jal created you in a particular way. فَجَعَلَ مِنْهُ الزَّوْجَيْنِ الذَّكَرِ وَالْأُنثَى. Male and female. Shaitan comes along and whispers to these young kids. And they really believe it. I believe it. They really do. They really have confusion and they really suffer. And the shaitan comes and says, the reason you're suffering is because, you're trapped in somebody else's body and you're not actually what you think you are. And you need to, and wallah, ikhwani, if we were talking about one child in 100 or one child in 1,000, I will say many people have problems and I understand that. Like, and it became to the point where some of the brothers and sisters told me now, in some classes, 50% of the class have a different pronoun to the pronoun that was on their birth certificate. Half. Something is not like going right. Yeah, something is confused. The fitrah that you are upon, the nature Allah put you upon. Now I'll tell you why the shaitan wants to do this. It's nothing to do with this issue. Don't think that's the issue. The shaitan, that's a small victory for the shaitan. Used to be called him and now you call her. That's no or it or they or some XE or something like that. And later it'll just be symbols. They'll upgrade. It'll just be like, call me question mark, something like that. So the shaitan doesn't want that. That's not important. The shaitan wants to change the greatest fitrah that Allah put inside of you, which is the nature to worship Allah Azza wa Jal alone. And that's a simple question. How many people who change their fitrah in other ways remain worshipping Allah alone? أقل القليل. No, nobody. As soon as they start changing their fitrah in one way, they change their fitrah in the ultimate way, the way that really matters. They stop worshipping Allah and they start worshipping the shaitan and their desires and all of that. For understand, the shaitan wants to change you from the nature that Allah created you upon. And we don't have to just talk about that. You can talk about other ways of changing the nature. This whole thing about pressure, about cosmetic surgery and all of that type of stuff. It's all it's the same thing. The shaitan wants you to change the way that Allah created you, so that you change the ultimate fitrah, which is ibadatullah wahdahu la sharika lah, that you worship Allah with no partner. And to take you away from that, to make you unhappy with Allah, to make you angry with what Allah gave you, to make you feel uncomfortable with what Allah gave you, to desire to be something else. Doesn't matter. Shaitan will get you whichever one way. Shaitan doesn't care. He'll take anything, whichever works. Until he gets you to leave the worship of Allah to worship either yourself or to worship the shaitan or to worship whatever else the people worship. Now we come to the next type of influence. And that is al-asdiqa, your friends. Allah Azza wa Jal said, Al-akhillau yawma'idhin ba'duhum li ba'din aduwwun illa al-muttaqin. The closest of friends, al-akhilla, it's the plural of khalil, your absolute best friend. On that day, they will be enemies to each other. Except the people of taqwa. So all those people that you took as your best friends and your close friends, if it's not a bond of Islam and Iman, ultimately, it is going to be a cause of regret yawm al-qiyamah. And Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَيَوْمَ يَعَضُّ الظَّالِمُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِ اتَّخَذْتُ مَعَ الرَّسُولِ سَبِيلًا يَا وَيْلَتَى لَيْتَنِي لَمْ أَتَّخِذْ فُلَانًا خَلِيلًا. On the day when the oppressive person will bite on their hands out of regret and will say, how I wish I took with the messenger away. Woe to me, I took this person as my close friend. لَقَدْ أَضَلَّنِي عَنِ الذِّكْرِ بَعْدَ إِذْ جَاءَنِي. They took me away from, they influenced me away from the dhikr when it came to me. So this is a person who bites on their hands yawm al-qiyamah they're so regretful, they bite on their hands. This person who bites on their hands yawm al-qiyamah, what happened? They were upon the dhikr, they had information about Islam and Quran and remembrance of Allah. And what happened? Along came a friend, لَقَدْ أَضَلَّنِي عَنِ الذِّكْرِ بَعْدَ إِذْ جَاءَنِي. And they took them away from the dhikr of Allah, away from the worship of Allah, away from the Quran, away from the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam after it came to them. There's not a person who said, I didn't know the guidance. They said, I knew it. And then this friend came along and took me away from it. And shaitan always deserts people. Remember that. Shaitan will always leave you. Shaitan will leave you. That's why even in the example we gave, and I'm going to be honest, where after shaitan convinces people to change the fitrah, what does he do? What does he do? He leaves them. And then they become all miserable and bullied and suffer, and some of them commit suicide, and they become like in a terrible state. Because why? Shaitan said, if you just do this, you'll be fine, you'll be happy, you'll be happy, you'll be happy. Do it, okay. Ma'a salama, gone. He's out the back. And he left you to yourself. That is how the shaitan behaves. This person bites on their hands yawm al-qiyamah out of such regret because their friend came and took them away. The example we have, the most beautiful example, the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, إِنَّمَا مَثَلُ الْجَلِيسِ الصَّالِحِ وَجَلِيسِ السُّوءِ كَحَامِلِ الْمِسْكِ وَنَافِخِ الْكِيرِ. The example of the righteous companion and the evil companion. A jalis is someone you sit with. We're not talking about necessarily the khalil here. The example of a good person you sit with and a bad person you sit with is like the perfume seller and the one who blows in the blacksmith's furnace. So you know what a perfume seller is, right? Everyone knows, right? Somebody opens the bags, got all the perfumes, puts on the table, sells the perfumes to people, little bottles of perfumes all on the table, and he's putting it on people and he's selling the perfume. The other one, we maybe don't know as much because we don't experience it like they used to in the past. But when they wanted to forge metal, like hammer the metal and everything, they would have a big furnace, a massive big fire, really, really hot, molten metal in it. And they would hammer, the metal in the furnace. Somebody has to blow on that to keep it really hot. Like blow on it to make the fire really, really hot. So they hammer the metal. So they all day, their faces inside of the smoke and inside of the furnace, and their face is getting burnt. And you can still see this thing today, the kind of how they make steel and metal and all of those kind of things in the forge. But it's something people maybe would have known more about in the past when people did it in the local, city center as opposed to in these big factories. فَحَامِلُ الْمِسْكِ إِمَّا أَنْ يُحْذِيَكَ وَإِمَّا أَنْ تَبْتَاعَ مِنْهُ وَإِمَّا أَنْ تَجِدَ مِنْهُ رِيحًا طَيِّبًا. As for the perfume seller, 3 things can happen. Either he gives you a gift of perfume. Akhi, take one, it's for you, free. He gives a gift of perfume. And either you buy it from him. So because you're around him and he puts his perfume out every day on the table, you go past him from time to time and say, you know what it is, I like this one, I'll take a bottle. And you buy a bottle from him. Or you end up smelling good. You're just around him, you end up smelling good. What are these 3 examples? The first one is the one who they benefit you as a friend, but you don't give them necessarily anything in return. They're maybe doing better than you, maybe practicing more than you, maybe more knowledge than you. So actually they're giving you free benefits, perfume, and you're not able to give them anything in return. The second one is the example of the friendship that is by an exchange. You benefit them, they benefit you. You do good for them, they do good for you. And the third one is the one that you benefit from just by reputation. Nothing else. You might not be what they're doing, you might not be like them, but because you're sitting around them, you get the benefit of the good that they do, even if you don't do it yourself. And the ajib thing in this is that in some of the narrations about the forgiveness of Allah upon the gathering of the people in the masjid, it's mentioned that the angels say, among them is a man. In a gathering, Allah's forgiveness came upon all the people, they attended the lesson, they benefited, Allah's forgiveness came. Among them is a man, he didn't come for this. He came to meet one of the people here. And he didn't come for the lesson or the Quran or the halqa or whatever it is. He just came to meet somebody after the lesson finished. I'm just sitting waiting for you in the back. Allah's forgiveness comes upon him just because he's sitting with these people. Just because he's sitting with them. Only. Just because he's sitting around them. So a person might not even be doing the good that they want to do, but still that person is what? That person is around good people, so they watch them doing good, they learn, they get inspired, and ultimately they get the benefits of being around good people. وَنَافِخُ الْكِيرِ إِمَّا أَنْ يَحْرِقَ ثِيَابَكَ. Either he's going to burn your clothes. You spend all day next to the furnace, at some point your clothes are going to set on fire. وَإِمَّا أَن تَجِدَ مِنْهُ رِيحًا مُنْتِنَةً. Or either you find from him a foul smell. So it's one of 2 things happens. Either he harms you directly or he harms you indirectly. If you're following him and actually doing what he does, he harms you directly. And if it's the case that you are with him but not following what he does, he gives you a bad smell. It's like maybe you didn't do the bad stuff, but you were with them, around them. You got a bad smell from being around those people. People think badly of you. You got bad habits from them. You're on the edge of copying them, even if you didn't copy them now. You got a bad smell. And this is why I say something very important. I said it last time and I want to repeat it here, is please differentiate between a friend and a da'wah project. What do I mean? A friend is someone who you share the practicing of the deen together. الْمَرْءُ عَلَى دِينِ خَلِيلِهِ فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِلْ. A person is upon the religion of their close friend. Let everyone look who they took as their close friend. Let everybody look who they took as their close friend. That's a friend. Then there is a da'wah project. Somebody you sit with, not because you are on the same deen and the same level and the same thinking, but because you want to call them to that which is good. And these people, my brothers and sisters, either you are influencing them or they're influencing you. And you have to be honest with yourself. There's no other option. It's a da'wah project. I'm saying somebody, you are sitting with them not because you share the same love of the deen, not because you are on the same page, not because you are competing with each other. وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. You're forgiving, you're racing each other for forgiveness of Allah. Not because you are competing in the religion. وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. Not because of that. Rather, you're sitting with them because you want to bring them towards good or towards Islam or towards practicing Islam. That person, you have to see them, they are a project, not a friend. And that means you have to evaluate how your project is going. If it's going well, فَاحْمَدِ اللَّهِ subhanahu wa ta'ala, praise Allah and keep going with them. Perhaps Allah will guide them through you. لِأَنْ يَهْدِيَ اللَّهُ بِكَ رَجُلًا وَاحِدًا خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنْ حُمْرِ النَّعَمِ. For Allah to guide a single person through you is better for you than the red camels, the best wealth. So if it's the case that you are doing well, perhaps Allah will guide them through your efforts. Alhamdulillah. Keep going. But constantly evaluate the situation. Constantly ask yourself, am I actually having this influence that I want to have? On the other side, if you see you are being influenced by them, you said, come on, we'll go out together. And, maybe, for example, you say, let's go to the masjid. And on the way to the masjid, maybe there's some music, some bad language, some kind of jahil talk that you used to do before. And you find yourself going back towards them. Don't say, this is my friend, I can't leave them. This is a da'wah project. It's not going well, walk away. If it's not working for you, walk away. Walk away with kindness. Don't walk away with evil, but be kind to them, but just distance yourself and say, I'm not ready yet. I'm not yet ready to call this person because they're having an influence on me. I'm not having an influence on them. That's why, for example, the scholars differentiate in going to a place of evil between two people. Both of them go to stop the evil, right? Both of them don't want the evil to be there. One of them goes and the evil continues, the same as normal. For example, the friends all, let's say, play music, whatever they're doing, they're all, doing something wrong, and you come and they just carry on. And another person has a hayba, a presence. People are a little bit scared of them. When they go, the friends turn it off and they switch off the wrong things on their phone and they start to behave. That person is doing something beneficial. But the one who goes and sits there and these people carry on, فَلَا تَقْعُدْ بَعْدَ الذِّكْرَى مَعَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. Don't sit after you remember with the oppressive people. Does that make sense? We're going to talk about now, two things. We're going to talk about role models. We're going to talk about social pressure. And then inshallah ta'ala, we'll not be too long, inshallah ta'ala. So first of all, we're going to talk about role models. Allah Azza wa Jal said, يَوْمَ تُقَلَّبُ وُجُوهُهُمْ فِي النَّارِ يَقُولُونَ يَا لَيْتَنَا أَطَعْنَا اللَّهَ وَأَطَعْنَا الرَّسُولَ وَقَالُوا رَبَّنَا إِنَّا أَطَعْنَا سَادَتَنَا وَكُبَرَاءَنَا فَأَضَلُّونَا السَّبِيلَ رَبَّنَا آتِهِمْ ضِعْفَيْنِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ وَالْعَنْهُمْ لَعْنًا كَبِيرًا. On the day when faces will be turned over into the fire, they will say, how we wish we obeyed Allah and we obeyed the Messenger. And they said, our Lord, we obeyed our sada, our chiefs, our leaders, وَكُبَرَاءَنَا, and the big figures in our society. فَأَضَلُّونَ السَّبِيلَ, and they misguided us from the path. رَبَّنَا آتِهِمْ ضِعْفَيْنِ مِنَ الْعَذَابِ, give them double the punishment. وَلْعَنْهُمْ لَعْنًا كبيرا, and cursed them with a great big curse. Ultimately, what happened? They obeyed the big figures in society. The Sada, the Kubara, and they took them away. So they had role models, they had people that they looked up to copy their way, to take their way as an example, whether because of their status, their power, their position in society. And Allah Azza wa Jal tells us to take the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as a role model. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرَ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. You have in the Messenger of Allah the most excellent role model for the one who hopes in Allah in the last day and remembers Allah much. Don't take the wrong role models. The sad thing today is that many of us have taken the kuffar as role models. Many of our kids know the names of footballers and whatever they are, musicians and all this stuff. They know these kuffar, they know their names, and they don't know the names of the Sahaba. If you said to them, tell us the Ashar al-Mubashirina bil-Jannah, they might get as far as Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, and Ali, and then they're like, they don't know. Like, if you ask them to name the players who play for Manchester United, one of the after the other, they bring them. So we've got these wrong role models. And taking the Sahaba and the Prophets as role models is something which Allah mentioned in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jalla said, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ آتَيْنَاهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحُكْمَ وَالنُّبُوَّةَ فَإِن يَكْفُرْ بِهَا هَؤُلَاءِ فَقَدْ وَكَّلْنَا بِهَا قَوْمًا لَيْسُوا بِهَا بِكَافِرِينَ أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ هَدَى اللَّهُ فَبِهُدَاهُ مُقْتَدِهِ. Allah said about the Prophets, after He mentioned 18 Prophets, He said, these are the ones that we gave the scripture, and we gave them wisdom and rulership, and we gave them prophethood. So if these people disbelieve, we have certainly entrusted this Quran to a people who are not disbelievers, the Sahaba. They are the people that Allah guided. So take their guidance as your guidance. The Prophets and the Sahaba. You can take the Prophets and the Sahaba as your guidance. We need to attach ourselves to positive role models. And while there is a room for positive role models in our time, there is for sure. Because we say, رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. O Allah, provide for us from our wives and children that which will be the coolness of our eyes, the beauty for our eyes, and we will find so much pleasure from them. And make us an imam for the people of taqwa. The imam is man yuqtada bihi, the one whose guidance is followed, the one who's taken as a role model. In other words, make us role models for the people of taqwa. So there's a place. So what we need we need the role models to be divided into three. We've got the prophets and the messengers. First and foremost, our messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We've got the Sahaba and the Salaf al-Salih, the righteous predecessors, the Sahaba, the Imams of Islam, and so on. And we've got role models today from those people who inspire our kids to better themselves, and to better themselves first and foremost in Iman, and then to get the dunya, the hasana from this dunya, which helps them in the akhirah and doesn't harm them in the akhirah. And these role models will be different. They will not all be students of knowledge or scholars, or not all. First and foremost, the greatest role model the kids have is, for a long, long time in their life, is their parents. For them, the teacher is nothing. It's dad is dad. I just want to be my dad. The little girl, she says, I just want to be my mom. That happens for a while, and then they kind of go a little bit away from it as they get to teenage years, and then they kind of come back to it a little bit. But we need to have these positive role models. We need to teach our kids the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. and the stories of the prophets. And we need to teach them the stories of the Sahaba and the stories of the great righteous people that came after them in Iman, because these stories are going to inspire our kids to want to be something better than what is available to them today. And then they look around them and they see mom is trying to do that and dad's trying to do that, and they see their local imam is trying to do that, and they're impressed by the people who come to the masjid, and their heart fills with, they've forgotten the football players and the movie stars and the, all these different people is gone from them. Their dream is to do the deeds of the righteous people, the deeds of the people of the past. But we need to teach this to inspire people to take a different role model. And if you have a chance, ikhwani wa akhawati, you have a chance to influence someone, make sure you influence them in a good way. Because some of you are in a position where you can influence people. Kids get so influenced by their teachers, they get influenced by the people around them, they get influenced by people who see them a lot, they get influenced by relatives, and some of you might be in a position where you have a chance to influence a lot of people. If you do, make sure you influence them in a good way. Don't be an accidental helper to the shaitan, where you're accidentally pushing the same agenda. Help them and show them with knowledge, with the beauty of Islam. And then if you're influencing them in the dunya, because they could be impressed by someone who's got a good business or someone who's got a nice car, or help them to understand the blessings of Allah and help them to understand that the deen is what matters before anything else. Don't influence them in a bad way. Don't be saying to me, see what I did. I just had to leave the masjid behind, and that's how I got all this, wealth and dunya. And no, influence them in a good way. And keep them far away. And this is a very important point. Keep them far, far away from resembling the non-Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum." Whoever resembles a people is one of them. And one of the things that we have been truly tested with in this time is resembling the kuffar. I'm going to be honest, there's a good number of Muslims put Christmas trees up. There are. And I'm not saying they don't pray or they don't believe in Islam, but they have fallen so far into the habits and the customs of the kuffar. Even if this wasn't an act of worship, no problem. You're thinking I'm going to argue that this is a Christmas and Christian, and it's not Christian. It wasn't Christian to begin with, and it's not Christian today. It was never Christian. Isa was not born on the 25th of December, that's for sure, because you don't get rutab on the 25th of December anywhere. The rutab that fell upon Maryam. That's the first thing. And on top of that, you definitely don't get them in Palestine on the 25th of December, that's for sure. But that's not the issue. The thing is, it was never a Christian tradition, and then it was a Christian tradition for a while, and now it's not. Now Hindus put Christmas trees, atheists put Christmas trees, Muslims put Christmas trees. That's not my point. My point is, man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum. If you resemble a people, you are one of them. You put the tree that is not the Muslim tree, that is not on a Muslim day, you resemble those people, you're one of them. It doesn't matter whether it's religious or not religious or atheist or secular, anta minhum. You're one of them. وَمَن تَشَبَّهَ بِقَوْمٍ فَهُوَ مِنْهُمْ. Allah Azza wa Jal told us a fundamental principle. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Oh Allah, guide us to the straight path, the path of those that you gave your favor upon, not the path of those who earned your anger, and not the path of those who've gone astray. We're asking Allah, Allah, don't make me on the path of the people who have gone away from your religion. In anything they do, don't make me, I don't want their customs, I don't want their culture. I don't mind the things that are universal, right? I mean, I don't mind, like, there's nothing wrong with, wearing a jacket, right? That's just a universal thing. It's cold, it's wet, whatever, you wear a jacket, no problem. But the things that are theirs, not the things that are just, shared, the things that belong to them. If you copy them in the things that belong to them, you're either from al-maghdubi alayhim or al-dhalin. You're not from the sirat al-mustaqim. You're not with an-nabiyyin wa-siddiqeen wa-shuhada'i wa-salihin. You're not with the righteous people. But keep our kids away from this. Ikhwani, I know living in a non-Muslim country, especially the non-Muslims, want us to integrate, and that's to a certain extent, it's not integration that's the issue here. What a lot of people want us to do is assimilate. Like integrate means I'm a good neighbor to my non-Muslim neighbor, and I'm kind and I'm a good citizen, and I don't, park my car in front of my neighbor's house that they can't get in, and I don't disturb people, and I'm a good citizen, I'm a good person to live in the country. No problem. No problem. لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم. Allah didn't stop you from the people that didn't fight you for your religion or kick you out of your homes. Allah didn't stop you from being good to them and from being just to them. My problem is when people want us to assimilate. They want me to delete my Muslim life and in place put my ... life of some other place. They want us to melt until we become them. And Islam doesn't tolerate that under any circumstances. Be a good citizen, be a good person, be a good neighbor, be a good colleague at work, be a good classmate at school, alhamdulillah. But don't ever be a copy of those people. Because we have a fundamental principle which is mukhalafatu ashab al-jahim. We want to be different from the people of Jahannam. And so if I see someone who is on course, I'm not going to say where they're going to end up, they might accept Islam, but they're on course to be from the people of Jahannam, why would I step in behind them and start following their footsteps? We have to have a strong Muslim identity, a strong Muslim culture. And we shouldn't be frightened about that. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't interfere with being a good neighbor or being a good person in the country or being, a positive influence on society, for you to have your own culture and your own identity. And it's very important we never ever allow our kids to lose that. The last thing I'm going to talk about in terms of influence or be influenced, before I talk about the other side, just briefly, I want to talk about social pressure. Now, we think social pressure is something new, right? Like we think now we're under so much social pressure. But let me read you a hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari. أن أبا طالب لما حضرته الوفاة دخل عليه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعنده أبو جهل فقال أي عم قل لا إله إلا الله كلمة أحاج لك بها عند الله فقال أبو جهل وعبد الله بن أبي أمية يا أبا طالب ترغب عن ملة عبد المطلب فلم يزالا يكلمانه حتى قال آخر شيء كلمهم به على ملة عبد المطلب فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا استغفرن لك ما لم أنه عنه فنزلت ما كان للنبي والذين آمنوا يستغفروا المشركين ولو كانوا أولي قربى من بعد ما تبين لهم أنهم أصحاب الجحيم ونزلت إنك لا تهدي من أحببت. When Abu Talib came close to death, Abu Talib really loved Islam and he loved the Prophet ﷺ a lot. He loved Islam. He mentioned in he's got poetry where he praises Islam as the best religion. He's got poetry, his own poetry, where he says Islam is the best religion. The best religion is the religion of my nephew, and he's the best guide, and he praises Islam. When it came to his death, the Prophet ﷺ came to him, and Abu Jahl and Abdullah ibn Abi Umayyah were next to him. The Prophet ﷺ said, my uncle, Say La ilaha illallah, a word that I will present your case in front of Allah. Imagine that the Prophet says, I will stand in front of Allah and I will ask Allah to forgive you. My uncle, just say La ilaha illallah and I'm going to argue on behalf of you. I'm going to stand in front of Allah and I am going to ask Allah to forgive you and give you Jannah. Just say La ilaha illallah. Abu Jahl and Abdullah ibn Abi Umayyah said, "O Abu Talib, do you wish to turn away from the religion of Abdul Muttalib?" They kept on saying it to him until the last thing he said, "Ala millati Abdul Muttalib." I die upon the religion of Abdul Muttalib. The Prophet ﷺ said, "I'm going to seek forgiveness for him as long as Allah doesn't forbid me." And then Allah forbade him in the ayah in Surah At-Tawbah. And then Allah revealed, "You do not guide who you love, but Allah guides who He wills." What is it? Social pressure. So much so that even when he was dying, I mean, what does he have to worry about his reputation? He's going to die. He knows he's dying. He's so under so much social pressure that even he's worried about it after he dies. And the last word he says is that he rejects Islam. And he says, "Bal ala millati Abdul Muttalib." Rather, I die upon the religion of Abdul Muttalib. And that just shows you how much people are affected and influenced by their society. The Prophet ﷺ standing in front of you, praying to Allah for you, asking you to say a word and saying, I'll take your case to Allah. Just say this word. And who is he listening to? Abu Jahl. He's listening to Abu Jahl. And so in the end, what does he do? He accepts to stay upon the religion of Abdul Muttalib. But here there's a latifa in this. Who was calling him to kufr? Abu Jahl and who? Abdullah ibn Abi Umayyah radiyallahu anhu became Sahabi. And that's the meaning of the ayah, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِ مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. You, O Muhammad, don't guide who you want, but Allah guides who He wants. So Allah Azza wa Jal chose not to guide Abu Talib and to guide Abdullah ibn Abi Umayyah, who was with him. For subhanallah, a person, when they reflect upon how society affects a person, you realize that you have to insulate yourself from that. And there are, I'm going to say, 3 ways to do that. And I'm going to finish with these 3, inshallah ta'ala. The first one is to distance yourself from the society which is bringing evil to you. You all know the story of the man who killed 99 people, and then he made it 100, and then he went to an alim, and he said, "What shall I do?" And the alim said, "Go to this city. There are righteous people there." So he left the city that he was in, and he went to the city of the righteous people. He died on the way, and Allah moved the earth to make him closer so he would be forgiven. The point is, what did the alim say to him? Get out of the environment you're in. Leave the environment you're in and go instead to the environment of those righteous people. Khwani, honestly, in a non-Muslim country, you're not really going to find that environment. Being honest with you. However, if there is a city better than another city, or there is an area of a city better than another area, this is also a kind of hijrah. It's not enough, but it's a start. If you can't leave and go to be among the righteous Muslims somewhere else, at least look, do I have a different place I can move to be closer to the Muslims and closer to the masjid and closer to the community to remove this negative influence around me? If you see your kids going wrong, going astray, you've got to ask yourself, how do I get my kids out of this environment they're in and into an environment where you get positive peer pressure? There is such a thing as positive peer pressure. People pressure you to come to the masjid. Not in a bad way, but like, come on, we're all going to the masjid. What are you going to do outside? Come on. Positive peer pressure. Positive peer pressure. طيب. The first thing is the environment. The second thing that you can do is to learn your religion properly, by which you can insulate yourself from the confusion and the desires that exist. Because when you learn your religion properly, I'm not going to say you're safe. أَفَأَمِنُوا مَكْرَ اللَّهِ فَلَا يَأْمَنُوا مَكْرَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. You're not safe. But can you say at least you are better protected? You know your religion properly, you know what's right and wrong. You know, subhanAllah, there's a beautiful ayah in the Quran. Think about this. You know the ayat, وَسَارِعُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ. In Surah Al Imran, Allah mentions the righteous people, right? الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين. What does Allah say about those righteous people? والذين إذا فعلوا فاحشة أو ظلموا أنفسهم. عجيب. Righteous people, people من أهل الجنة. أولئك جزاؤهم مغفرة من ربهم وجنات. They're going to get forgiveness and Jannah. For what? They did evil deeds, but they came back to Allah. I got a question. Why did they come back to Allah? They did evil deeds, right? Why did they come back to Allah? The answer is they came back to Allah because they already had knowledge of Allah. They had a relationship with Allah. If you have a young boy from the shabab or a young girl, and this young boy or young girl knew Allah and knew the Quran and knew the deen, and they went astray. They fell into some bad habits, bad lifestyle and all that. And then what do you hope will happen to that person? Insha'Allah, they'll come back. وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً أَوْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ ذَكَرُوا اللَّهَ فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا لِذُنُوبِهِمْ وَمَنْ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَلَمْ يُصِرُّوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلُوا وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. They're gonna repent, stop doing it, and they're gonna come back to Allah because they already knew Allah before and they had that relationship with Allah before. But don't underestimate the value of learning your deen properly as a protection. The third thing, and the last one I'm going to mention to you tonight, instead of being influenced, become someone who influences others. And what I mean by that is, go out and share your religion and be an example and call people to it with your words and with your deeds. This requires knowledge, of course. The Prophet ﷺ said, بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Transmit from me if only an ayah. Why is this a protection? Because ultimately you are only one of two people. Either you are an influencer or you're someone who's influenced. So if you don't want to be someone influenced, you need to start influencing other people. I'll put it to you in another way. You're either a shepherd or you're either one of the sheep. If you don't want to be one of the sheep, it's better time you train yourself to be a shepherd then. You teach and you learn the religion to convey it to people, and you start being the example. I give the example of the kids at school. There's always a leader of the pack. You know, there's always someone everybody kind of looks up to. And a lot of times bad influence, right? Bad influence, bad behavior and all that type of stuff. You got a choice. Either you follow that group and you follow that leader, or you decide, I'm going to be my own leader. And in the beginning, you only lead yourself. You don't have a big following. You just, ana amiru nafsi. I'm in charge of myself, that's it. And you be different, and you pray, and you do whatever you have to do for your religion. لا تخافون لومة لائم. You're not scared of the blame of anybody. What will you see happens? Wallahi, wa Rabbil Kaaba, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. What will happen is, you'll start to see people start to gravitate towards you. Because people crave a leader. Shabab, I'm telling you, people crave a leader, someone to follow. People are naturally sheep. So as soon as you stand up and say, you know what it is, I'm going to practice my deen. I'm gonna practice my religion. I'm gonna do what I wanna do. You wanna tell me to go to this haram place? I'm not gonna come. I don't wanna come. I don't care if you don't wanna talk to me. I don't care if you're not gonna speak to me. Who cares? I'm not bothered. I don't wanna come. I do things my own way. Wallahi, you'll see slowly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. People will start coming and they'll start taking your guidelines, not to be in charge of the people, we don't want that, but to be someone who is not influenced. Instead, you're the one influencing people. Because ultimately, people crave that kind of role model and influence. And if you're willing to suffer for a short time, it gets easier after that. And I will tell you honestly about myself. By the grace of Allah, I accepted Islam at a young age. And when I first accepted Islam, I felt very, very lonely and very isolated. I'm from a city called Newcastle in the United Kingdom, and we don't have like a lot of Muslims there. And I had some Muslim friends, I'm not saying I didn't, but I felt very isolated, a little bit pressured to a certain extent. And at that stage, I had a choice. Either I can hide my deen and try to still pretend like the non-Muslims, and I tried that for a while. I probably tried it for 6 weeks. Wallahi, it made me so miserable. Miserable and under pressure and just horrible situation. Until I just said, you know what it is? I'm done. This is who I am. You like it, you like it. You don't like it, whatever. I'm just gonna live my life like I want as a Muslim. And I'm not saying it was perfect. I still used to get scared at times and nervous about things. I remember I used to go to the Jumu'ah. We had a musalla in the school. I used to go into, not a permanent one, the teacher gave us a classroom. And I used to go and close the curtains so nobody would see me praying Jumu'ah. But in the end, I just got to the point where it was like, no, you know what it is? This is not the way to live your life. You're gonna have to step up and say, this is who I am. I don't really mind what you think. And slowly you'd see, even if people didn't accept Islam, you would see non-Muslims actually giving you way more respect than they gave you before. Way more, like people who used to like insult you and bully you and like laugh at you and whatever would start giving you respect. And you're like, why? Because this person's recognized that you've stopped being a sheep. They've recognized that you're not gonna be with them anymore. Now you're a rival, you're not a sheep anymore. Now you're like, this is okay. And here's someone, you've carved your own path. You just do your own thing. And wallahi, you'll honestly find that this is human nature. So what I advise all the young people to do is to take the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba, the righteous Imams of Islam, the role models of today among the Muslims, and to make them your role models. And ultimately, don't think about what people will think about you. I'll give you a principle. If you do something to please them, whatever you do, you will not make them happy. وَلَن تَرْضَ عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُم. They'll never be happy till you change your religion to their religion. Change your name, change your clothes, change your accent, change every single thing. They're still going to think bad of you anyway. People are never happy with you. If you act to make people happy, Allah will be angry with you and the people won't respect you. But if you act to make Allah happy, to make Allah pleased, then Allah will be pleased with you and Allah will put love in the people's hearts. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ سَيَجْعَلُ لَهُمُ الرَّحْمَنُ وُدًّا. Allah will place love in the hearts of the people. Don't look at what those people think of you. Don't care. Don't be nasty to them. Don't be rude. Just, I'm who I am. This is me. You like it, you don't. I'm just doing my thing. I'm not troubling anyone. But I'm going to live my life according to my beliefs, my morals, my etiquette, my practice. I'm not going to follow you guys. You guys do what you want. Like, over time, you'll see that people will actually not only respect you, but actually some people might even come to Islam or come to practicing Islam through you. And we said, we brought the hadith, in the famous hadith, the Prophet said to Ali ibn Abi Talib, لَأَنْ يَهْدِيَ اللَّهُ بِكَ رَجُلًا وَاحِدًا خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنْ حُمْرِ النَّعَمِ. For Allah to guide a single person through you is better for you than the red camels. I think that's as much as, I know you guys are used to, everyone is used to short lectures. I should say I'm not qualified to give short lectures. Yani, I've forgotten how to do it. And that's what Allah Azza wa Jal made easy for me to mention. I do want to take some time for some questions, just for like, say, 15 minutes until 8:30. But I want to do one thing. For those people who have prior commitments, maybe it's late for them, they're tired, don't feel that you have any obligation to stay. It's maybe 15 minutes Q&A, you have stuff to do, it's no blame yani, on you at all. Then you can just quietly go when you want to and feel comfortable, inshallah. For our sisters, I have, where's it going? I have the Slido. The thing is, I'm going to mute it because I don't want the online. I'm not sure I want. Oh, the online are all from local people, right?
Yeah, I can share it on Instagram.
No, it's okay. I'll just give it to you. Okay. So, guys, if you do go, just do me a favor. Just make it a little bit quiet, yeah? So, you can go to a website called Slido, Slido. It's for the sisters or the people online. And it'll ask you for a code. The code is 373-9768. 373-9768. 373-9768. This will allow you to post questions for the sisters easier. Now, while the sisters are doing that, one more time we'll give them the code. 373-9768 on the website slido.com, slido.com. Brothers, Ikhwati al-Kiram, does anyone have any questions? Let's start on the topic. We can go off the topic later, but let's start on the topic. A break? We take a break later. I want to go to sleep, inshallah ta'ala. 15 minutes.
I got two.
What we can do is just slightly open the window for just a few minutes. I think it's getting warm. Now.
I didn't understand the word insulate. The last thing you said, 3 ways to insulate.
The last one I think I said, sometimes it's difficult to remember what I said. I think the last thing that I said is to, 3 ways to protect yourself, to surround yourself with, like to protect yourself from that influence. And the third one we said is to be an influencer of other people rather than to be someone who is subject to influence. And you should close the door by being your own, and by being an influencer yourself. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Not an online influencer on YouTube. What advice do you have for sisters struggling with the abaya and the hijab? Wallah, I really believe that is a beautiful question. And I want to say, honestly, when I was having a go at the YouTubers, and that's for a reason, because of the misguiding of the people, but I'm not in any way having a go at a sister who struggles with the hijab. I want that to be clear. I'm not in any way speaking bad of a sister who's struggling with the hijab. That is understandable, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give her and give us a thabat. And no doubt, we don't, any steadfastness on the religion, we don't. But what we have a problem with is them influencing other people to take it off. That was the issue. As for how to manage it, I want the sister to think about 2 things. Number 1, I want her to remember always one ayah. I think most of us know the ayah. أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. Doesn't the one who created you know best? My sister, we don't know what's good for us. Me or you. وَعَسَى, يعني maybe, وَعَسَى أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. يعني maybe you love something and it's bad for you. Maybe you hate something and it's good for you. There's many situations where we don't know what's good for you and me. We don't know what's happening tomorrow. We don't know what's good for us. We don't know what will happen Yawm al-Qiyamah. If we always remember that Allah will never ever decree something for us except that it's good for us. Whether we know it or we don't. Some people say, I don't know how it's good for me to come for Fajr. I promise you it's good for you. Some will say, I don't see why I should keep my thawb above my ankles for the guys. I promise you, Allah doesn't tell you to do something unless it's good for you. So remember always that Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't put hardship on you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمْ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمْ الْعُسْرَ. Allah wants to make things easy. Allah doesn't want to make things hard for you. So if Allah legislated something, it's because you need it, whether we know it or not. So when we remember that, we feel something straight away in our heart that, okay, I'm struggling, but wallahi, I know this is good for me. Whoever knows it or not, but I'm sure this is good for me. That's the first thing. And the second thing I wanted to remember is that if you do what pleases Allah, Allah will put acceptance in the people's hearts. Have you ever wondered, people always say to me, some countries, they say to me, you know, it's really, really hard to wear the abaya or the hijab or the niqab or whatever. And I say to them one thing, and not just the sisters, by the way, the brothers who say it's really hard to pray at work and all of that. I say to them one thing. Sisters, there are other people in this country who wear the niqab and the hijab and all of that. Is there no one in the country? There's people. So no, there's people. The people in your city who does it. There's people in my city who do it. But how is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for them? There has to be like a reason for it. And Allah Azza wa Jal puts acceptance. The Prophet ﷺ said, ثُمَّ يُوضَعُ لَهُ الْقَبُولُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Allah puts acceptance on the earth for a person. And Allah Azza wa Jal will make the people accept it from you. All you have to do is focus on pleasing Allah. Never ever think the abaya and the hijab were legislated to please, in fact, they cannot possibly be legislated to please men. Because the opposite, right? A man who's following his desires would rather all the women walk around without abaya and hijab. If he's following his desires. And he wants to see all the women without it. When she puts on the hijab, she's doing the opposite of serving the men. She's serving Allah Azza wa Jal. Ibn al-Qayyim said something profound. هَرَبُوا مِنَ الرِّقِّ الَّذِي خُلِقُوا لَهُ فَبُولُوا بِرِقِّ النَّفْسِ وَالشَّيْطَانِ. They ran away from the slavery they were created for, slavery to Allah, and they became slaves to themselves and slaves to the shaitan. So just keep that in your mind and be around the sisters who wear it. Don't say, I'm going to wear it sometimes and not wear it sometimes. Sahih, if that's the best you can do, it's a start. But be around the sisters who wear it. And people will look at you, but people will look at you anyway. People are going to look at you whether one way or the other. Don't let it come into your heart. Just say, this is for my Lord, this is for my Rabb, this is not for anybody else. And have izzatun nafs, that strength of character, that strength in your soul, in yourself, that you say, this is me now. This is what I want to be. Don't anyone tell me what to be. This is what I want to be. And wallahi, with good friends around you, inshallah ta'ala, first couple of days, people say things. By the third, fourth day, they realize there's no point, give up. And eventually Allah Azza wa Jal will put acceptance in their heart. Even parents who have a problem, even colleagues, even people at work who have a problem, Allah will put acceptance in their heart. Bi-idhnihi subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can you talk a little bit, I'm just picking some good questions and I'll take from the brothers as well, don't worry. Can you talk a little bit about tazkiyah? No doubt, purification of the heart is based on two things. The word tazkiyah is related to the word zakah, right? Tazkiyah is to make zakah. Does that make sense? Yani zakah, yuzakki, is to make zakah. Okay, and what does the word zakah mean? It means two things. It means at-tahara or at-tathir wan-nama. It means to purify and to build and develop. So it's wrong to say that tazkiyatun nafs is about cleaning the heart and leaving it empty. It's about cleaning the heart and filling it with good. If you don't do both sides, you have a problem. So you cleanse the heart by istighfar, tawbah, turning back from the haram, by reflecting upon yourself. The first part of tazkiyatun nafs, by the way, is actually to look at your heart, to actually inspect yourself. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wal tanzur nafsum ma qaddamat lighad. Look at what you put forward for tomorrow. then when you see those sins, and always find that you cleanse it, you wipe it clean with a tawbah, wal istighfar, turning back to Allah, dua. And then you start to build, you fill it with the love of Allah, with the knowledge of Allah's names and attributes, with good deeds, with dhikr, with trust in Allah and hope in Allah and fear of Allah and tawakkul upon Allah. And you fill it like that. If you want to know more about it, I have an online kind of a course. It's on our YouTube channel, the academy I teach at, AMAU. So you can just type in YouTube, AMAU, and then you can put Tim. It's easy. Instead of Muhammad, so many spelling, just put Tim. And if you look there, there's on our YouTube channel, there is a series of classes on purifying the soul. And they're just on the YouTube channel for anyone to watch, inshallah ta'ala. I'm going to pick a couple more from here, then I'm going to take one or two from the brothers. If you've been giving da'wah to a friend with no progress, it sometimes feels like you're trying to force them. Is there another way to approach it? Oh, definitely. Definitely. 100%. That you need to look at, is there another way? Now, the other ways are as follows. Number one, try to get someone else maybe to talk to them. So the way you've been talking to them, sometimes people just push against someone. But if someone else comes from another angle and talks to them, that could be also something there. Try varying your usloob, the style of speech. So if you've tried softness, go for the fire and brimstone. Go for the maw'idah. And make their hearts scared. If you've tried being rough and tough with them, go with the softness and the gentleness. Which one should we always use first? Softness first, yeah, always. If you know softness is not working, then you have an option to be a bit rough with them. From the ways that you can, and you look into is for also no doubt to make dua for them, no doubt to try, for example, distancing yourself for a while to see if you think that would help. Don't distance yourself if you think it's not going to help. But if you believe that maybe your tolerance is actually what is keeping them like that, don't be frightened to distance yourself. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. What are the dangers of not wearing correct hijab? I would like the cold truth. Okay, no problem. I'll give you the cold truth. I'm going to read you a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. I'm not going to add anything to it. I'm just going to read you the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, he said, خير نسائكم الودود الولود المواتية المواسية إذا اتقين الله. He said, the best of your women are the loving, who will have many children, who are compassionate, and who are tolerant. Maybe that's a good word. As long as they have taqwa of Allah. وَشَرُّ نِسَائِكُمْ, the worst of your women. The hadith. This is a hadith narrated by Al-Bayhaqi in Sunan Al-Kubra. It's also narrated elsewhere. وَشَرُّ نِسَائِكُمْ, the worst of all of your women. Al-mutabarrijat, the ones who do not cover properly. Al-mutakhayyilat, the ones who have arrogance. هُنَّ الْمُنَافِقَات, they are the hypocrites. لا يدخل الجنة منهن إلا مثل الغراب الأعصم. None of them will enter Jannah except like the amount of times you see a red crow. You seen a red crow before? That's the cold truth. هن المنافقات. Now, inshallah ta'ala, that doesn't, I hope, bi'iznillahi ta'ala, that's not an application to someone who's just, like, for example, anybody. That's what the hadith came with. They are the munafiqat. They will not enter Jannah except like a red crow. And except like you see a red crow. ونسأل الله عز وجل العفو والعافية. What do you advise a person who lost hope in making tawbah and don't think they'll ever be able to change? I can't think of a better advice than the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. Surah Al-Zumar. Allah said, say, O my servants who have transgressed against themselves, don't despair of the mercy of Allah. Allah forgives all sins. Jami'an. He didn't say all sins except all sins. إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. So I say to someone who feels that they're not going to change, I think there's something that's confusing you. I think you're looking at yourself and not thinking about Allah. If you're looking at yourself, your sins could be as big as the world or bigger than the world. But if you're thinking about Allah, you can't bring a sin bigger than Allah's forgiveness. And you can't do haram that is more than Allah's mercy. If you believe that, you're not thinking right of Allah. وَمَا قَدَرُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدَرِهِ. You cannot do a sin that is bigger than the mercy of Allah. Like, you have to ask Allah for that mercy. It's not just automatic. You sin whatever you like and you get it. You have to try for it. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned a man in a hadith Qudusi that Allah Azza wa Jal said, أَذْنَبَ عَبْدِي ذَنْبًا. My servant committed a sin. فَقَالَ أَيْ رَبِّ. He said, my Lord, اغفر لي ذنبي. Forgive my sin. اغفر لي ذنبي doesn't necessarily mean that he's made full tawbah yet. It just means, oh Allah, don't make this sin a problem for me. Cover it up for me. Allah said that I have a servant who knows he has a Lord. يَغْفِرُ الذَّنْبَ وَيَأْخُذُ بِالذَّنْبِ. He forgives sins and he punishes. Then again, ثُمَّ عَادٍ. He did it all over again, the sin. فَقَالَ أَيْ رَبِّ. He said, my Lord, اغفر لي ذنبي. Forgive my sin. So then Allah Azza wa Jal said, I have a servant who knows that he has a Lord. يَغْفِرُ الذَّنْبَ وَيَأْخُذُ بِالذَّنْبِ. He forgives and he punishes. ثُمَّ عَادٍ. He did it again. And again, the same thing happened. And Allah Azza wa Jal said it again and he said, اعمل ما شئت فقد غفرت لك. Do whatever you want, I forgave you. Why did Allah forgive him? He kept doing the sin. Allah forgave him because every time he sinned, he remembered that Allah is the one who forgives. Just because of that, because he remembered Allah forgives and Allah punishes, Allah forgave him the repeated sin that he kept on doing until he died. And Allah said, do whatever you want, I've already forgiven you for everything. Just because he realized he has a Lord who forgives and punishes. Just find it in yourself to say, رَبِّ اغْفِرْ لِي ذَنْبِي. My Lord, forgive my sin. That's it. And leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And try, as you can, to leave it. And remember what the Prophet ﷺ said, وَأَتْبِعْ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمُوحَا. If you do a bad sin, follow it up with a good deed, and it will wipe it out. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. This is a very important question. Is it important to renew your intention for wearing the hijab? Because sometimes you just wear it every day. I want to be really clear about something here. Keeping away from the haram does not require a particular niyyah for it. Sahih, if the sister has a niyyah of ihtisab, reward upon reward. Lekin don't say, if I don't have the right niyyah, I may as well take it off. Because the ulama, they say that babu tark, the topic of leaving something, is not the same as babul fi'li, doing something. It's not the same. And in leaving something, it is sufficient for you to leave it, even if you don't necessarily every day have in your mind that I'm leaving this haram for the sake of Allah and all of that. So I really want to clarify a confusion that a lot of people have, that people will say, and it's a trap of the shaitan, that just you don't have the right intention, take it off. And a lot of people who took it off, they said on these YouTube videos and whatever, that I took it off because my intention wasn't pure. It's not what Allah requires from you. If your intention is pure, nuran ala nur. But Allah Azza wa Jalla requires you to follow that command And regardless of whether you think that you're doing that for the right reason or not. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Can you please refer to the surah and ayah about Allah creating shayateen from jinn and mankind to misguide people? It's Surah Al-An'am on the... Okay, I'll just quickly find the ayah number. It's ayah number 112. Surah Al-An'am, ayah number 112. Last one from the sister side before I just take some from the brothers, inshallah. How do we not make the dunya the biggest of our worries? Having uni and work and just being consumed by everything feels like there's no time for anything. The first thing you have to do is you have to worry about the akhirah more. Because there is a hadith, حسنه بعض أهل العلم, some of the scholars declare it to be hasan, وضعفه بعضهم, some of them declare it to be ضعيف. Like the hadith, inshallah ta'ala, the meaning is testified to elsewhere. من جعل الهموم هما واحدا هم آخرته كفاه الله هم دنياه وأخراه ومن تشعبت به الهموم في أمور الدنيا لم يبال الله في أي أوديتها هلك أو كما قال. Whoever makes their concerns a single concern, the concern of the akhirah, Allah will take care of all their concerns in this world. And whoever allows their concerns to be split up among the matters of this world, Allah does not care in which valley they die. This hadith, as I said, some of the ulama said it's weak and some of them said it's hasan. But in any case, there is many ahadith that witness to the various parts of the hadith, that generally the meaning of the hadith is correct, and I brought it from the point of just summarizing the answer. You have to make the akhirah what you're scared of. And you can't do that unless you know enough about Allah and His names and attributes and actions, and enough about the akhirah that you actually feel genuinely and truly worried about what's going to happen to you in your grave. When you do that, it's like, for example, if you had, let's say, a really stressful exam at uni, okay? And the doctor told you had stage 4 cancer. Which one are you going to panic over? Your exam at uni? You're really going to sit there thinking, I don't know if I'm going to get a first in this exam. You're not going to care. Because now there's a bigger worry that replaced it. If you can worry about the akhirah like that, the worries of your dunya will go. As for splitting your time, the best that came about it is the hadith of Hanzala al-Asadi, in which the Prophet ﷺ said, وَلَكِنْ يَا حَنْظَلَ سَاعَةً وَسَاعَةً. But oh Hanzala, there is a time for this and a time for that. You've got to give some time to your deen. You're allowed to have some time for your dunya, but you've got to give some time for your deen. And there's a video you can watch on the Iqra YouTube channel called Balancing Dunya and Deen. We just did it recently in Sweden, and it was live on our YouTube channel. It's still there. So you can watch that for a lot more information about that, inshallah. Any last questions in the last 3 minutes for the brothers? And that makes 2 hours, and that is plenty of time, inshallah ta'ala. And then you can have your break. I'll give you till Fajr. Is that okay? Habibi.
When you start becoming more influenced and you influence other people more and more, they're going to tell you things about themselves that they wouldn't tell other people. And sometimes they're going to tell you things which are haram. And you want to advise them in a good way. So how to advise them in a good way which doesn't break the trust which they used to saying that thing about themselves in the first place?
Beautiful. That's a fantastic question. So when you start to influence people, people share things with you, sometimes that are private, about things that they do that are wrong. How do you deal with that situation, and how do you not betray their trust, but how do you help them? So the very first thing you do is, as they're telling you, try to tell them stop. Say, my brother, listen, before you tell me, listen to me first. don't expose what Allah kept hidden for you. Allah has covered it for you. He is a sittir, the one who covers. Don't break the cover of Allah. Because when something is between you and Allah, it's very hopeful that Allah will forgive you for it. When something is private between you and Allah. When it becomes known to the people, it becomes more serious. So say, look, don't tell me, but you want help, I understand that. So we say, look, don't tell me about your situation, but tell me about people. So for example, sometimes someone asks me a question, he says, Ustadh, you know what I do? I've got this problem. I say, stop. Don't tell me about yourself. Tell me about people you know. For example, someone says, Ustadh, I know a person, or I know some people do this, or I've seen people do that, or I've heard of people doing this. It's not lying, but you keep the issue, you get the good advice. So you say, look, I'm willing to advise you, but don't tell me the things that Allah has kept covered. And if you do that, inshallah, you can still help them, and you might even, sometimes have to kind of guess what's going on, but at least they won't have verbally kind of opened that door, and they'll learn for next time. To say, look, I've got friends who do this, I've got problems, I've seen brothers doing this, I've known of brothers who do that. But don't say I and I and I, so you don't remove the cover that Allah Azza wa Jal has placed upon you. And I think if you can do that, you can help them still, give them great advice, but in such a way that inshallah it won't break that cover. And what you must never ever ever do is never ever share with anyone else. I am and you guys know some of the idea with like things, ruqya and all that type of stuff. And subhanAllah, you see people in the most horrible, private kind of situations that nobody would wish. Wallah, you wouldn't wish for your mother to see you in the situation that Taraqi sees you in. You wouldn't wish for your wife to see you in that situation. Like, it's horrible, wallahi. Like the most horrible situation a person can be in. The last thing you want to do is be sharing that with people. Yes, me, silent. That's why how many ruqya videos you see me doing ruqya on people? 0. Never ever. I'm never ever going to share that with somebody. Never. I might anonymize and share a benefit, like if this happens, do this. If you've heard of this, do that. I saw a case like this, do this, but never, ever, ever would I give out somebody's information that they gave to me privately. If they did open their heart about something and I tried to stop them and say, no, I want to tell you, I've done this. Okay, listen, first of all, don't tell me anymore. I will do my best to give you some advice, but that will never, ever go beyond here. Amanatul majlis. Now, last point, because I want to stop now, it's 2 hours now. Go on, carry on. You got a follow-up question, right?
What if they're asking with no remorse? It's not like they're asking to seek advice, but they're just
they're telling what you did without remorse. So then in that case, I think what you have to do is to make them realize that it's wrong. Like sometimes people do, they say, this is how I was doing last night. And you remind them, all of my ummah will be forgiven, illa al-mujahirun, except those people, illa al-mujahirin, the people who share their sins with the people. So you tell them, like, look, this is not a good situation for you to be in. And to make tawbah and come back to Allah. And remember, learn some of the evidences that you can use to share with people, like the hadith of the mujahideen and the hadith of concealing what Allah Azza wa Jal, what's between you and Allah, and so on. So you can share that with them so that they can learn to get remorse. And I think when they see your reaction, they will have remorse. Because when they see you not laugh and say, say astaghfirullah al-azim, a'udhu billah, really, subhanallah, may Allah save you and save me. Like they feel like, oh, I said something wrong here, didn't I? They feel from you that they said something wrong. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Ikhwani, I think that is more than enough, inshallah ta'ala. And I think it's a very good place for us to stop. We did... The live stream was going on, inshallah ta'ala. So the video is recorded for anyone who wants to go back to it later on, inshallah ta'ala. And I'm sure the brothers had some questions and what have you as we kind of go out. But I do want, for the students who are coming to the dawrah tomorrow, I want you to get an early night. That's like from your teacher, okay? I want you to get an early night. Because me personally, like, I'm feeling it. It's been late nights, early mornings, a lot of study. The students who have the dawrah, you need to get yourself like not late tonight, so you can have good sleep, so you can wake up in time for Fajr and in time for the dawrah tomorrow. We have a lot to get through, inshallah ta'ala. That's what Allah Azza wa Jalla made easy for me to mention. Allah Azza wa Jalla was best. Wa salatu wa salam ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een.